Have you ever been terrified of a situation only to find out God already handled it? Well, that's what happens in Genesis chapter 33. So let's go ahead and get into it. Just in the chapter before, we know that Jacob was wrestling with God. He had emerged from this wrestle with God defeated, but defeated in a good way, because God has to break us down in order to build us up sometimes. Sometimes God will allow us to get ourselves in such a situation that he is the only answer. So that's what God did. God wore Jacob out. He emerged a better Jacob. He emerged Israel. There was still a lot of Jacob in Israel. So now in chapter 33, Jacob sees Esau coming in the distance. And just still being cautious of the situation and not really knowing what type of time Esau was on, he went ahead and split up the children and his wives and the maidservants. This time, instead of being in bad where he could get away, he let it. At this point, Jacob had already sent all of the gifts. And it was a massive amount of things that he sent his brother. He was, again, just trying to let him know, I don't want no issue. But then when he sees his brother, he keeps referring to himself as a servant, as his brother's servant. But to his surprise, Esau was happy to see him. Esau hugged him around his neck and kissed him. You see, even though the last time they had saw each other, it was because he handled the situation in a way that he didn't have to. God had been dealing with Esau in his heart. And just remember, Esau really didn't respect the birthright. Esau wasn't a spiritual man. Esau wanted the monetary and the material blessings that his father could give him. And so when Isaac had given Jacob the blessings of Abraham, Esau was like, you don't have nothing for me? Like nothing? You can't give me something? And so he did give him a blessing, and Esau was a blessed and wealthy man. In fact, Jacob and Esau were going back and forth about all of the gifts that Jacob had sent. Jacob was saying, I have it all. Esau was saying, I have enough. They were truly blessed. It was prophesied that Abraham's seed would be fruitful. So even though Esau didn't get the Abrahamic blessing or have the birthright, God still honors his promise, and he was still very much blessed in a way that he valued. So even though we can see that Esau is like cool with Jacob, Jacob is still a little weary of his brother. His brother offered to stay back with him. Jacob was like, nah, you go ahead. Jacob was like, well, I'll just leave somebody with you. Jacob was like, nah, that's all right. So Esau went on ahead, and Jacob let him go on for like 3 days before they picked up. They also went in the opposite direction of what Esau went. They were supposed to be going down to where Esau was. They went somewhere else. They were in the land of Canaan, and we know that God had instructed Jacob to go to Bethel. God also had instructed them to pitch tents, meaning live in the area temporarily. However, when Jacob got to Succoth, he built booths. This is something between a tent and like a home. So he was doing a little compromising, but it wasn't obedience. But when they got to Shechem, they built a tent, and Jacob erected an altar and named it El Elohi Israel. Just kept thinking, why isn't he going to Bethel? He was in the area of where he was instructed to go. He wasn't in Bethel. He did erect an altar. He wasn't in Bethel. I guess my point is the altar was good, but obedience would have been better. All this reminds me is that sanctification is a process. And although he had been conquered by God, he still has some growing up to do. So dear God, let us work out our salvation with faith and trembling. And even though Jacob wasn't obedient, God was still faithful. Y'all, if you're not reading your Bible, what you doing? You better get in this book. It is so good.